Hello, I'm Anthony, and today I want to talk about a new investment I've been working on. I've decided to invest in mounting solar panels to my roof, and for me this has been a very exciting prospect for quite a number of years, but it's never quite worked out economically. But 7 years ago I reckoned that I would be having solar panels on my roof by 2020, and now that 2020 is here, I've been trying to make the numbers work, and I got some quotes from some installers, and I decided to go for it. So I just wanted to explain some of the background to me wanting to invest in solar panels. So I've got a big interest in energy saving, and I've had that interest over the last 10 years, ever since I moved into my house. So my house was, it's a bungalow, 3 bedrooms. It was built in 1993, and I live in Scotland. And over the years, I've invested in loft insulation. So one of the things I did here was add a lot of additional insulation. So we've got the existing loft insulation down here, and then I added in some of this 200mm thick space blanket insulation on top. I added additional floorboards on top of polystyrene blocks. The other thing I've done is I've replaced nearly all of the floor insulation. So welcome to underneath my floor. So one of the things I did was install rock wool in between all the joists. So the old insulation was 70mm deep, and it was sort of slung in a big arch in between the joists, and you had lots of cold spots. This, on the other hand, is 140mm deep. That was a comprehensive job I did in 2019, and it has made a massive difference to the comfort in my house. The next thing I'm also doing is wall insulation. So I've got 18mm deep cavities in my walls. Behind my plasterboard, you've got 80mm thick studs. That cavity is filled with fiberglass, and I've been replacing that in some of my rooms with PIR foam insulation, and that has about double the insulation resistance compared to fiberglass. I've also upgraded the boiler. I've replaced a G-rated boiler with an A-rated boiler. So this is my boiler. It's a Valent boiler. It's was installed 9 years ago in 2011, and this replaces a G-rated boiler. So that saves a little bit more money on propane. And I've invested in a wood-burning stove. Again, installed 9 years ago in 2011, and this does most of the heating work in the evening time. So when this is going out, pelting out full blast, the thermostat in the hallway will stay above. It will stay above 20 degrees, and that just keeps the main boiler off. And this has done two things. Number one, wood is, in my experience, it's probably cheaper than propane to burn. The price of propane, certainly 7 years ago, was astronomical, and the price of wood has stayed fairly stable. And the other benefit of having a wood burning stove is that if my boiler fails, or if the power supply to the boiler fails, I don't have to have a cold house. I've got another way of keeping my house warm. And finally, the other thing I've been investing in is draft sealing. Okay, so one of the things I did underneath the kitchen cabinet was seal up the pipe transit with expanding foam. The same also applies for the back of the wall where it meets the floor. There's a lot of cold drafts which appear in this part of the kitchen. When you've got a hole in the floor, that's a route for cold air to come in and warm air to get out. So the other thing I noticed when drawing the curtains is that I get cold feet in this area. And the reason I get cold feet is because you get a draft right along the bottom of the skirting board. So what I've done here is add decorator's cork, and that prevents your draft from happening. Okay, so one of the things I've got is a split level bungalow. So the top ceiling and the top part is higher than the lower ceiling. But the boundary between the two, right above this ceiling level, on this wall, you've got the loft. And what I discovered after 9 years of living here was that this plasterboard was just facing the loft without any insulation behind it. So this was running the whole length of the house, and it was a very obvious cold spot. So that was solved by adding rock wool behind it, and now that job's done and the house is retaining a lot more heat. And all of that effort has reduced the demand on my heating bill. So back in the day, I would fill up my tank, my propane tank, in October, and it would need refilling again in February. These were very cold years. It was the year 2009 and 2010. But ever since the last time I've refilled my tank was October 2019. It's now November 2020. I still don't need to refill my tank. I could probably go on until January at this rate. The winters aren't as cold, so it's not a fair comparison. But the temperature in my house during the daytime, when it's 9 or 10 degrees outside, I don't need to use the central heating system. And solar panels, I've always been a bit of a geek when it comes to new technology, and I've always been fascinated by the idea of turning sunshine on your rooftop into useful electricity. So it's 2020. The costs that I am suffering in terms of electricity are about £500 a year. The price of electricity I'm paying at the moment is 17 pence per kilowatt hour, and I'm using just over 2.4 megawatt hours of electricity every year. So the deal now with solar panels is that there are no subsidies anymore. It's now replaced with a smart export guarantee, and each electricity company can set what that tariff is. Some of them have a tariff which is literally 0.1 pence per kilowatt hour. I'm going with Octopus Energy, and they are offering a smart export guarantee of 55 pence per kilowatt hour. Up until very recently, that was the best price you could get. There's now a better price. You can get Tesla Energy, the Tesla Energy plan, and they will pay you 8 pence per kilowatt hour for export. However, there are conditions that you need to satisfy in order to qualify for that tariff, and I don't qualify for that. You need to have a Tesla Powerwall, amongst other things. So I went to a couple of installers, and in fact I went to about 5 installers, and out of the inquiries I made with all of those installers, one of them gave me a quote. It turns out it was the electrician in my village, who's MCS registered. MCS stands for Microgeneration Certification Scheme, and in order to get these export tariffs, your solar panel has to be installed by somebody who is registered with this scheme. So he gave me a quote. It was £10,900, and that includes an 8.9 kilowatt solar panel array, which includes power optimizers. It includes an 8 kilowatt solar edge inverter. It includes in-roof mounting kit. It includes a hot water immersion heater. It includes all the ancillary equipment, and it includes all the work, all the labour. That's pretty good. And many solar panel installations on people's rooftops typically max out at 4 kilowatts. And the reason they max out at 4 kilowatts is twofold. It used to be the case that with feed-in tariffs, the rate, that the price you got paid for your energy generation would drop off dramatically after the first 4 kilowatts of solar electricity generated, so people didn't bother with panels greater than 4 kilowatts. The other reason why people maxed out at 4 kilowatts is because there's a lot of paperwork involved with the electricity company to have bigger installations than that. So the quote included a generation estimate, and for my house in Aberdeenshire in Scotland, it was reckoning at around 7.1 megawatt hours in the first year, with a decline of about 0.5% per year over the subsequent years. Now, I've spoken with people who also have solar panels in my village and in nearby areas, and the reckoning is that these estimates are on the low side. They're quite conservative. They get more power generated each year in reality, and I'm hoping on that. So the question of whether this project is worth it is worth looking at. So in the absolute worst case, all the electricity from my house would be exported. So I wouldn't live in my house, and not only would the electricity be exported, but there wouldn't be any inflation on electricity prices. And in that situation, you would get a 28-year return on the investment. And when you consider that panels have a 25-year nominal lifetime, it wouldn't pay for itself. The investment wouldn't pay for itself, and you wouldn't make any profit out of it. So it's not saving you anything. But that's an absolute worst case. It's not particularly realistic. Electricity prices have always gone up. So a realistic worst case is a situation where you're still exporting all your electricity generated, but now you've got a 6% annual inflation for your import and export prices. When you factor that in, the return on investment is 17 years. And inflation is something you always have to think about. My electricity bill now, or at least the electricity price that I'm paying now, is considerably higher than it was many years ago. And that's likely to continue. But that's the worst case. In terms of an existing case, my estimation is that I would reduce my electricity bill by 30%. And if I did nothing more than that, that would reduce the return on investment down to 15 years. But if I do more than that, so say for example, I run my washing machine and my dishwasher in the middle of the day instead of at the evening time, if I use a hot water controller to charge up my hot water tank instead of using my propane boiler, I reckon I could reduce my electricity bill by 50%. And I also reckon I would reduce my propane bill by a further £110 a year. That reduces my return on investment down to 14 years. Now, when you consider the expected lifetime of the solar panels is 25 years, and the Inverters probably need to be replaced sooner than 25 years, but the guarantees that you get offered with inverters now are getting longer and longer. Some of them are offering 25 years. I've got confidence that an inverter installed now would last the whole length of time. Now, I've had a discussion about this, and the question is whether an inflation rate of 6% is realistic for electricity prices. And I think in order to answer that question, you have to look at where electricity prices were a number of years ago. And I remember what electricity prices were 15 years ago, but only roughly speaking. I don't have an electricity bill from 15 years ago anymore, so I can't compare. But I found a useful chart on Google, and this was for business electricity prices. And micro businesses are probably in the same ballpark as domestic properties in terms of the rates they pay. And as you can see, over the course of 14 years, from 2004 to 2018, the prices have gone up. They've gone up about 2.5 times, and that approximates to an annualized inflation rate of about 6.5%. Now, what's happened in the past could serve as a basis for what's going to continue happening in the future, but I think it's going to be more complicated than that. I think you'll still be offered a fixed rate electricity price if that's what you want, if you're not terribly interested in smart meters, if you don't want to invest in solar panels or batteries. A fixed rate electricity price will still be there, but I think the prices of those will continue to go up. The thing that makes things complicated in terms of calculating return on investment is what are known as time of day electricity prices. And under those circumstances, you'll probably find your nighttime prices are very, very cheap, and your evening prices become very, very expensive. And they complicate the whole calculation on a return on investment. But in order to take full advantage of those prices, you need to invest in batteries or solar panels. It's difficult to take advantage of those price schemes without them. The other thing to note is that the estimated generation for my solar panel array is nearly three times what I'm consuming at the moment. And that sounds bonkers. Why would I invest in a solar panel array that's too big? And the way I'm thinking about it is I don't want to be targeting my summertime electricity use. I want to be targeting my wintertime electricity use. Now, based on the performance I've seen with 4 kilowatt arrays that other people have had, their wintertime generation is about half what their wintertime consumption is. So if I step up the size of my solar panel so it's double what a 4 kilowatt array is, I should be able to get electricity generation in December to match what my electricity consumption in December will be. And that's a nice thing to have. It basically means that every other month we'll be generating far more electricity than what I use, and it's far better to have too much electricity generated than not enough electricity generated. It gives me more options. And in the bigger picture, electricity costs are just a small fraction of what my overall energy costs have been. Over the last 10 years, diesel costs have been by far and away the biggest energy cost for my household. And it's saving on those diesel costs. That's my bigger target. So when I consider the investment in solar panels, I'm looking at a future case. I'm also going to be charging up an electric car. And assuming I do 15,000 miles a year, I'll make a conservative assumption that 50% of all the miles generated come from the solar panels on my house. 50% of all the miles, that corresponds to about 2 megawatt hours. And that reduces the return on my investment down to 11 years. So that means that out of the 7.1 megawatt hours I generate, 4.5 megawatt hours gets used either by my house or by my car. And if I could somehow get most of the electricity generated from my rooftop, 90% generated, all of a sudden the return on investment gets reduced down to 8 years. However, that makes the assumption that I can take all of the surplus generated in the summertime and use it in the wintertime. And to do that, I probably need a 4 megawatt hour battery, and those things are enormous. They come on the back of lorries, and I haven't got any room in my house to fit one of those in. So that's not going to happen. But if you're a business and you run a factory, that kind of return on investment can certainly make sense. So the question is this investment in solar panels worth it? And I think for enthusiasts in solar power, it definitely is. I think 14 years return on investment will pay for your solar panels, and after 14 years, everything else is profit. And for that return on investment, you not only get your solar panels paid for, but you have something to enjoy. I enjoy numbers. I enjoy looking at the technology. I get involved with the process of selecting a solar panels, selecting the inverters, thinking about the wiring and the topology, and watching it all work together. That's something I get fascinated in. That's what ticks my boxes. If you invest in an electric car, return on investment goes down to 11 years, and ordinary people who look at utility value only, I think those people will do well to bide their time. Hardware prices are continuing to go down. Just as an illustration, a 330 watt panel price, it dropped from about £500 in 2014. You can now find examples at £80. The other question about whether it's worth it applies to the value on your house. If the value on your house doesn't go up after investing in this, it's no good investing in solar panels and then trying to sell your house. You'll never get your money back. Now, I asked one estate agent whether it was worth it, and they reckon that it doesn't increase the value of your house, but it does make your house easier to sell. However, I've also seen one report that reckons it increases the value of your house by £30,000. I think the bottom line is that if you invest in solar panels, you do so because you're going to be staying in your house, and I've got no reason to move house. I think it's far more enjoyable to just invest in your own house. And on questions of affordability, if you don't have the money to invest in it, the Scottish government offers 0% interest loans. And so long as the loan repayments are smaller than the export payments, in the worst case scenario that I illustrated earlier, then it's worth it. So I received a quote from Barry Chapman in mid-August, and I was very keen to get this solar panel array installed. It's now mid-November, and they've only just started. So what happened was that in mid-August I received a quote. I studied the quote, wanted the quote revised. I wanted to have a hot water heating controller included. So that came back later on, and I also needed to check with the local authority whether I needed planning permission or building warrants. That's really important. They confirmed that there were no requirements, and The next thing I needed to do was check with the electricity company what the actual procedure was for getting a connection. Now, if your solar panel array is less than 3.68 kilowatts, and this is the inverter rating, it's not the solar panel array rating. So if you've got a 4 kilowatt solar panel array, chances are you've got an inverter which is less than that. Now, if it's less than or equal to 3.68 kilowatts, you don't need permission to connect to the grid. You only need to notify them after you've done the commissioning. So there you've got a different application form. It's called G99. My electrician, he handles it, and the district network operator doesn't charge anything to handle that application. But it does take a long time to get a response from them. In my instance, it was 6 weeks. I think it was the beginning of October we got a quote, and they were wanting £7,000 plus VAT to upgrade the local transformer tappings. Now, at the time, my quote was using a 10 kilowatt inverter with an unlimited export. Now, we revised the application down to an 8 kilowatt inverter, which is still fine with a bigger solar panel string. That's no problem at all. And we put an export limit of 5 kilowatts. That was resubmitted, and at the end of October, we got the go-ahead from from SSE Networks. So all systems were go at this point. So I submitted my deposit to Barry Chapman, and everything proceeded at speed afterwards. So overall, my cost, it was £1.20 per watt. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Now, you can get £1 per watt quotes elsewhere. You can get a 4 kilowatt solar panel array installed for about £4,000. Sounds cheap, but you get cheap. So you get cheaper solar panels, you get a cheaper inverter, you don't have any optimizers, and it won't be an in-roof design. So what I went for were these smart solar panels. So that's that. They go up to 330 watts, but there's a range of ratings that use the smart module. Barry was very keen to get a solar panel system which includes the power optimizers as part of a single package. It's cheaper to get it like that than it is to buy them separately. So I ended up with 320 watt panels on my roof. I know you can get 355 watt panels with LG, but you're paying a lot more money for it. So I think Barry was getting the right price. He was getting the right performance for the right price. Here you can see a lot of details about the solar panels. If we zoom in, one of the things at the front which is noteworthy is the product warranty and the power output warranty. So after 25 years, they're reckoning it will be an 83%. It will be 83% output compared to its original rating. That's useful. It's 19.4% efficient for the 320 watt panel. All right, and this is the this is the Solar Edge inverter. So this is what I'm getting is the 8 kilowatt inverter here. So it's 99% efficient, and when you think about what happens with that 1% that's lost, that's generally lost as heat. So when you are outputting 8 kilowatts, you're going to have 80 watts worth of heat coming out of that inverter. So it's going to have the same kind of heat as an old-fashioned incandescent light bulb. It's got a 12-year warranty, and it can be extended to 25 years as well. The hot water smart energy controller. So you have your mains power coming in here. and then you have your cable going to your hot water immersion heater going out. That can be used up to 3 kilowatts. Yeah, here's a typical example on how it all hooks up together. So you have your solar panels here, and then it goes to these power optimizers, which are underneath each of the panels, and then you have a string which goes to your single phase inverter, and then you have your connection to your consumer unit and the rest of your house, and you have your smart energy hot water controller that exists on your hot water immersion heater circuit, and that will take all of the surplus solar power up to 3 kilowatts, and it will put it into your immersion heater, assuming the thermostat on your immersion heater will allow it to be received. And the other thing I am getting are in-roof solar panel adapters. So this is the data sheet for it. You can see what the overall effect will look like. So instead of having your solar panels on top of your roof, they will exist flush with your roof tiles. I think that's a much better look. So the most important thing to note about this system is that it's got a pretty quick installation time, and that's important. So 2 weeks before installation, I received a lorry which delivered this to my driveway, and this was when things were starting to get exciting. And once I saw that dumped on my driveway, I just knew that it was finally coming together. It was no longer a paper exercise anymore. So the installation time is 3 days. Now, days 1 and 2 just happened a couple of days ago. Day number 3 is all the work that happens inside. So all of the wiring from the roof to the inverter, which is going to be installed, and you'll have the commissioning, and then finally the energization. So on day number 1, we had 3 people. So we had an electrician, a joiner, and a groundsman, and there were 2 roof planes to be worked on. So it took 1 day per roof aspect. So typically on each day there was setup that took about an hour, unloading things from the vans, getting the scaffold towers set up. It probably took less than an hour, to be quite frank. Once that was all set up, it was then getting straight on with tile removal. And the photograph on the right, that's exactly what you get. You get all of your battens and your counter battens exposed, and that's a good time to just see that there's nothing particularly bad happening. So in my instance, there wasn't any rot, there wasn't any wasps' nests. There was 1 broken tile that was found, but there was nothing serious in terms of leaks. As you can see on the photograph, a couple of the battens were broken here. That was probably down to me walking about when sweeping my chimney. And this is what the panel mounts look like. So your solar panels sit on top of this. So your solar panels are part of the waterproof barrier for your roof. And what happens is that water will flow off this panel, and it will then flow onto the adapter underneath, and then it gets diverted to the side, either side of the panel, and then the water will just drain down the side of the adapter. And that's how it works. So it took about an hour to mount these GSE adapters. It took about 4 hours to do the flashings and the tile cutting. That was the hardest job. I didn't want to be anywhere near there. The amount of dust that was kicked up by the tile cutter was enormous, and that was the thing which takes the most amount of time. actual photovoltaic work doesn't take much at all. You know, that's an hour, and that's held together with 6 clamps, 3 of which are shared with another panel. So on average, it's just over 3 clamps per panel, and then you've got 2 connectors per panel to hook up, and you're done. So mounting the solar panels is easy. So, you know, my overall impressions are that it looks very, very smart. I'm very impressed by what they do. By having the panels flush with the tiles, you lower the dead weight on the roof. And the other advantage is that you've got recovered roof tiles, and they've got a market value. And people do like to have weathered roof tiles. So my electrician reckons that in-roof mounting systems are faster to install than the on-roof systems. So he gave me a quote option for an on-roof system. It was an extra £1,000, and he says there's a lot of fiddling around with on-roof systems to make sure they don't leak. I know of one YouTuber who's got problems with his on-roof system, and he's had to have the solar panels taken off in order for that leak to be investigated. So that's all a big hassle. And I think, I've already said they look very smart. I've had some torrential rain last night, and I thought that was a good opportunity to go into the loft and check that there were no leaks, and I was satisfied with the result. So tomorrow I'm looking forward to the final installation day, so I will now just show you a brief video tour of what the solar panels look like. Thanks for watching. Okay, so this is how my solar panel arrays are looking like. So this is my 16 panel array right here, and round this way right, here's my 12 panel array. I think that looks pretty good. Let's take a closer look. So here we've got flashing. It goes straight into the gutter, and up here we have the panel array. It's fixed onto the mounting bracket using these items, and then in here we've got flashings underneath the tiles, and I think it looks pretty decent.